we're talking politics with Politico's Mark Caputo and pollster and radio show host Renan Amandi. Gentlemen, we were talking about the Republican Senate race. Now let's go to the Democratic side real briefly. Alan Grayson, Patrick Murphy. This race is already dirty, nasty. Lots of charges. We had Alan Grayson on the show here last week. He was throwing haymakers at Patrick Murphy. Patrick Murphy's firing back at Grayson. How are we looking at this race, Mark?
We're looking at it as a cage match. They're not as bad as the Republicans, but they're still largely unknown. Keep referring to the Florida Chamber of Commerce polls, the most recent one. It showed a nominal or marginal lead of 3 percentage points for Patrick Murphy over Grayson, but 58% undecided. Grayson does have a lot of internal negatives, though. His party structure is against him. The money is on Patrick Murphy's side. If Grayson wants to tap into the Bernie Sanders phenomenon, but remember this, Bernie Sanders got slaughtered in Florida, and Patrick Murphy is a Hillary Clinton person.
Well, let me just pick up on that, because I want to move it, because we're limited on time now, but the Bernie Sanders comment reminded me of the fact that while Bernie Sanders did not do well in Florida, Bernie Sanders supporters are still very vocal across the country in Florida and seem to now be wanting to take out their anger on Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee, who seems to be in a fight with almost everybody these days. I don't, it's sort of like, it's almost a Stephen Colbert thing. Will Debbie Wasserman Schultz go down as the worst DNC chair that among likability, or the absolute worst among, what are those two choices? What is happening with Debbie Wasserman Schultz right now?
Well, I'll tell you what's happening. She's got a real challenge on her hand in her own district with Tim Canova. And what I think is taking place, Jim, is you're seeing a proxy war take place. That's the institutional DNC establishment Democrats versus the Sanders people. And on August...
The Sandersnistas.
The Sandersnistas, yeah. on August 30th, this is going to be after the convention. If that convention goes off the rails, which is looking more and more like it might, if they cannot bring the two parties together, you have a very big problem for anybody that's on the Sanders side, because here's what can happen. If Bernie says, you know what, we're going to take this revolution across Florida, and I want you to start contributing to Tim Canova and anybody else who wasn't in the party line, that's a problem for Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Except the problem is, in her district, Bernie Sanders, barely, I'm not even sure he got 30%. He got destroyed in her district. Yeah. So if you're looking at it as a proxy fight, I would not want to be the Bernie Sanders soldier in that fight.
I think she's the heavy favorite, but also remember, what is motivating people to come out on August 30th in Broward County? If you've got energized folks and you've got a ton of money to spread around, it could be a problem.
Certainly there's a lot of money nationally coming in against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, not really for it.
I just don't know if the voters exist that actually would carry Canova across the finish line. Obviously, though, this is what elections are for.
All right, so I want to talk about the congressional race. We've got a great congressional race in District 26. Yeah. Carlos Curbelo is a Republican who is now in a district that is heavily swung in terms of Democrats, in terms of redistricting. I think it's a D+11. So he's in a lot of ways in serious trouble no matter who he faces. The Democrats who are fighting to fight him, to get in the race with him, is Annette Taddeo, who ran with Charlie Crist for lieutenant governor, and Joe Garcia, the last congressman before Carlos Curbelo. Who Curbelo beat in a non-presidential election year with a lower turnout. But having said that, the most amazing thing to me happened in this race. Garcia releases a poll showing he's up 26 points, or 23 points, something like that, and Annette Taddeo says, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to release a poll that shows you're only up 20 points, or 19 points. I've never seen a candidate release a poll showing that she was getting crushed in an election.
I don't understand the logic of it. Perhaps there's something that they know that we don't, but here's what I can tell you I think might happen. She has been the candidate that's been hand-selected and endorsed by the DCCC. And by her campaign putting out a poll that says, yeah, Joe's up 20 points with less than 4 months to go, perhaps the DCCC says, maybe we don't want to do as much in this race as before.
The logic that she had was that when they did message testing and they showed the great positive message of Annette Taddeo, businesswoman, self-made, that when the question was re-asked, she would actually beat Garcia handily.
Except that's a push poll.
It's essentially a push poll. It assumes a static electorate, and the big problem is in the end what matters is the top line. And the top line, both in her poll and in Joe's poll, shows that Annette is losing by single digits, and that's a problem.
And his favorabilities, and all this talk about his previous problems in terms of the ethical issues with, former person on the staff, and the election stuff, and all that, doesn't really hurt him because it seems to be baked into the pie already. They seem to already know that about Joe and have moved on from it.
It depends. Again, this is what elections are for. When you start doing paid media and paid communications, and you have paid staff going out there collecting ballots and knocking on doors, things change. But to your point, yes, that was the story of 2014. That might not be the story of 2016 that helps Carlos Curbelo remain in